Hey everyone, it's Balar, and I want to talk to you about improving your Tidal Island navigation to Hailrake using 3 techniques. This video will be divided into sort of 4 major sections. One, an overview about Tidal Island and what makes this layout actually somewhat difficult to navigate properly. 2, the first technique to improve your time, which is a pretty simple one, that is to always turn at the ledges. 3 is going to be the second technique, which is going to be about selectively turning at ledges. So you avoid long ledges and you commit to short ledges. And this section will also cover how to identify that. And the fourth and final section will be about the third technique, which will be rock weaving. Rock weaving is essentially when you have a tidal island that doesn't have any ledges. What you have instead is you have 2 rock outcroppings in the middle that have a gap in between them. If you know how to read the layout, you can essentially look at the rocks and tell whether or not you should go through the gap to get to the ship faster. Now, on the other hand, this technique is also a little bit dangerous because if you misread it, you actually end up taking yourself from what would be otherwise be a good read to the worst outcome you could have for that particular layout, as essentially what would be happening is you would be diverting from the path that would lead you to the ship to go through the gap, and then you'd have to loop around the rest of the island to find it. So, with that in mind, let's jump in and start with an overview of Tidal Island. So, Tidal Island, the first important thing to know about Tidal Island is the following. The general orientation of Tidal Island is a diamond shape. The green up here represents the entrances. So, in Tidal Island, there are 2 entrance orientations, and you can tell which one you're in by looking at the positioning of the entrance relative to your character. So this is the right entrance orientation, and then if the entrance was to my left, it would be the left entrance orientation. Another way of telling is if you look at your minimap and you divide it in half, if the entrance falls in the right half, then you're in the right entrance, and the opposite, where if it falls on the left half, it will be on with the left entrance. So as we look at this, we further have sort of a left split and right split. And for all layouts, there'll sort of be a rock at this sort of portion of this line, and you'll have to make a decision whether or not you're going to go to the left side or the right side of the island as you look at it. There are 3 ship positions, and the ship is where Hailrake is. There is a west ship, east ship, and south ship. Now, depending on what entrance you're in, the sort of orientation of the diamond will be skewed or tilted a little bit towards that orientation. So it won't be sort of a straight up and down diamond like this. Each entrance in Tidal Island has 7 layouts. So there are a total of 14 layouts in Tidal Island. Now, the interesting thing about these entrances is that, or these layouts I should say, is that they're mirrored. So whatever happens with the left entrance will happen with the right entrance as well. And what I mean by that is as follows. When we look at Tidal Island, there are long ledges and short ledges. A long ledge is essentially a ledge that starts at like a western or eastern point, depending on what side it's on, and it'll wrap around the entirety of the island to sort of the opposite cardinal direction. So here, our ledge starts to the west, finishes at the east. The short ledge, on the other hand, will start at the west, as you can see over here, and will finish at the south. It can also be east and finish at the south. The key thing to know here is that short ledges only sort of do a half turn around the island, while the long ledges is more of like a big turn around the bottom end of the island. So as we look at this, we can see that there's a long ledge if we go to the left split. There's a short ledge if we go to the left split. There's a long ledge on the right split. There is a short ledge on the right split. So already we know from these 4 sort of layouts that you can find long and short ledges in the left entrance, whether you're going to the left or right. what happens if we don't have any ledges? Well, we have sort of these rocks layouts. And you can see with these layouts, we have the ship in the east position once, sort of at the opposite side of the left entrance. So you'd have to go to the right split to get there. We have up-down rocks, where it's essentially the ship is directly across or south at the south point of the island. And then we have same side rocks, where the entrance will always be on the same side as the boat. So we have a left entrance, left split. Just quickly looking at the right entrance, we can see that this holds true as well. We have a right split long ledge, a right split short ledge, left split long ledge, left split short ledge, opposite side rocks, where it's going to be on the left side for the right entrance. Up down rocks will be directly across, sort of at the southern point. And then finally, same side rocks, where if it's at the right entrance, it'll be on the right side, so you'll have to take the right split down. So with that in mind, there are some interesting implications of the fact that Tidal Island is mirrored. And one of the first things to understand is that you can't really tell what's going to go on with the layout, or at least I haven't been able to figure out what's going to go on the layout at this point, sort of right here. You have to commit to sort of going down one of the splits to see what or how the layout is going to develop until you can make further reads. So because of that, if we are thinking about this, I went and examined sort of all the possible ways you can go for the variety of layouts that Tidal Island has. And one of the interesting things about it is your navigation strategy. Say, for example, you always like going to the left. You always like going to the right. Or maybe you always go on the same side as the entrance. So if you're at the right entrance, you always take the right split. If you're at the left entrance, you'll always take the left split. Or you have the preference of always going on the opposite side. So for example, if you're at the right entrance, you'll go to the left split. What ends up happening is that in 6 of the layouts, you will have sort of the best read with that method. In 2 of the layouts, you'll have a neutral read where it doesn't really matter what way you go. The times will be relatively the same. And then in 6 of the layouts, you are going to have a poor read with this strategy. So as a result, unless you have some sort of ability to read right at that first rock outcropping, you're going to get the same results no matter what your general strategy is over a long period of time. So how then can we go about improving our time if what ends up happening is that no matter what way you go, you're going to have 6 good reads, 6 bad reads, and 2 neutral reads? Well, there are some techniques to help us improve. The first technique we're going to talk about is a simple one, but it works very effectively. And if all you're looking at this video is to avoid the worst outcomes you can in Tidal Island, then this is what you want to do, which is to always turn at the ledge. So when we turn at the ledge, essentially what happens is we are going to get rid of the worst outcomes that we can. That is the long ledge. If we go up here to where I was running some tests, I'll show you. Right here, we can see that this is a long ledge for the right entrance. What happens if we turn? We gain 13 seconds versus committing to the long ledge. On the left side, if we were to turn at the ledge, we gain about 9 seconds versus committing where we would lose 9 seconds. If we look at the right split ledges, if we were to turn at the left entrance that had a long ledge to the right, we would gain 19 seconds. That's a pretty big gain. And then we have what would happen if we had a long right ledge with the right entrance? We'd gain 11 seconds. So just by turning at the ledges, you are going to immediately improve your average time to navigate Tidal Island because you are avoiding the worst outcomes. So essentially, you're taking any of these long ledge outcomes that are bad reads and you're moving them to the neutral category. It's okay, right? Or a decent read. would be a better way of phrasing it. And I think that's how I say it down here. So you take what would be a bad read to become a decent read simply by switching or turning, because you'll always avoid the long ledges. Now, what about short ledges? This is a little more complicated. You do actually lose time for turning at a short ledge sometimes. Other times, the difference is really sort of negligible. So, for example here, you can see that we lose time for turning at a short ledge. However, there's another case here where essentially there's not really much of a difference. It's less than a quarter of a second for turning at a short ledge versus committing to going that way. So that's pretty good. Now, when we think about that, we see this as negligible and we lose a little bit of time. And then down here for the right ledge, for the right splits, you can also see that there's one where we lose about a second. I would think that's pretty negligible. And then about 4 seconds, which is not negligible in my opinion. So as we look at what we're trying to do, when we sort of have like a negligible thing versus losing some time, anytime we lose a non-negligible amount of time by turning at the ledge, that will still be considered a bad read. But if there's not really much of a difference between committing or turning, it's going to turn what would otherwise be a bad read into a decent read. So as a result of this, what ends up happening is we end up in two of the short ledges, because you don't lose time for turning, or you don't lose much time for turning. We turn those from a bad read into a decent read as well. So as a result, we just by always turning at the ledge, we've taken our bad reads from 6 to about 3. That's pretty good. Now, what if we could be a little better about that and improve further? And the answer is we can. So we're going to come to the second technique, which is as follows. We are always going to turn at, let me back up for a second. The second technique is as follows. We are going to selectively turn. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the left entrances for help here. The reason why we use the left entrances is that there is a particular read you can use to identify the left split long ledge reliably, because it's always going to be in the same format, or it's going to look the same from sort of layout to layout when we have a left long ledge. And then on the opposite side, for the right split, there will be a particular read you can see every single time for a short ledge. So we'll know whether or not to commit or to leave. Now, there is a critical exception here, or a note of danger would be a better way of phrasing this. The read that you use to tell the left long ledge is the same read that you'll be able to tell the right short ledge. That is, on the right split, what indicates a short ledge will indicate a long ledge on the left split. As a result of this, it's super easy to mix them up. So I would highly encourage you to choose a particular side to go to. And in this case, my personal strategy is always to navigate to the left, so I avoid the long ledge. And I can identify that long ledge and turn every single time, because I'm more worried about the long ledge than the short ledge. So with this selective sort of ledge turn, what we're going to do is, if we identify it's the long ledge, we will turn. If we know it's not the long ledge, we'll commit. Well, what happens when we do that? What ends up happening here is when we do this, we'll always be able to recognize when we sort of have the short ledge, and we'll commit. As a result, what ends up happening is we get rid of this. Sort of this loss of 8 seconds goes away, because we know we can recognize the short ledge and we'll commit and do it that way. Same thing down here. We lose 4 seconds for a short ledge, but we can identify it now and we'll commit. As a result, we get rid of this entire row from bad reads and move it to decent reads. So as a result, when we look at the selective left entrance ledge turn, what you'll see is now we only have 2 bad reads left that have to deal with the rocks layouts. Well, the third and final technique is to rock weave, and the good news is that using it, you can eliminate these 2 bad reads and make them decent reads. So, what is rock weaving? Rock weaving is essentially turning in between the gap. So, before I continue, it's important to understand that if you weave a rock wrong, you can actually make what would be a good layout into a bad layout. For example, if we look at this, if we were to read this wrong, it would be 29 seconds. This is the worst outcome out of any of these. Same thing over here. 29 seconds again, worst outcome. So, with that in mind, you need to know how to properly identify what rocks to weave and when to do it. If you're able to do so, what ends up happening, if we look here, say for example, we have this opposite side rocks. Let's say you were committing to the right split, which is about 27 seconds. If you were able to identify when you should weave the rocks, you'll save about 6 seconds. Let's look at the left entrance over here. If you were to commit to the wrong side, that is to go to the left split, you would be at about 26 seconds. If you were to properly identify that you are on the wrong side and correct it by weaving the rocks, you would gain about 4 seconds versus just keeping on with your commitment of your originally chosen side. So then the question is, how do we end up, weaving rocks? Like, when is a good time to do it? This brings me to sort of the final point or the final section of this video, where we're going to talk about how to identify the long ledge and how to properly weave rocks. So, as I mentioned earlier in the selective turning section, we only want to selectively turn with left entrances. The reason why we want to do this is that with right entrances, identifying the ledge, there are many different ways of sort of identifying it, and it changes and it's a little more complicated. Versus with a left entrance, there is literally one thing you need to know for the left split and one thing you need to know for the right split. As I'm going to teach you, the method I'm going to teach you as to how to navigate Tidal Island is as follows. You will always go to the left because it'll be the most consistent and easiest way to identify when you should turn at a ledge and when you should not. So regardless of whether you're at a left entrance or a right entrance, you will always take the left split. Now, with that being said, let's look at sort of the long ledge, and I'll give you the key read that you're looking for. So this is a long ledge on the left split. As you can see, it starts to the west here. It follows the island all the way to the east around. We want to turn here. How do we know when to turn? Well, you will always see that this is about the same distance. It makes a little square corner right here. About, like, we'll call it like 1 unit, right? This is 1 unit away, 1 unit away. Now, maybe you can call it like a centimeter, whatever you want to say for it. I'm just going to say a unit, but it makes a nice even corner. The distance sort of horizontally to the wall over here is about the same as the distance vertically to the wall down here. This will be present on any of these long ledges on the left entrance for the left split. As you can see here, the corner is there again. Again, corner, square corner, that's equal units horizontally and vertically. Every single one we look at, you can see it. As I just cycle through, it's very, very consistent. Now, let's show you what happens with a short ledge so you can see just for the sake of contrast. With a short ledge on the left entrance, left split side, you can see that there's a huge gap. It's not the same thing, sort of the same horizontal and vertical distance from the rock wall here. Same thing, short, large, short, large. So as we look at this, that's always going to be our tell. And what we're going to do instead of, trying to make it overly complicated is we'll always look for this sort of 1 unit, like equal sort of square corner. If we see that, we know to turn around. If we don't see that, we are going to commit and we're going to take the short ledge. Just by doing this, we are going to, as I mentioned earlier, take our 6 bad reads and turn them down to just 2, which is awesome, right? So the general rule is this. We're always going to take the left split, and then we will always turn at ledges when we're in the right entrance. When we're at the left entrance, we will see if it is the long ledge versus the short ledge. And again, we identify the long ledge by looking sort of at the horizontal and vertical distance here. If it's like one sort of squared or equal unit horizontally and vertically, it makes a nice little corner, like a right angle corner for us. Excellent. That is what we are looking for. Otherwise, you'll see the short ledge, which will look like this, where the vertical and horizontal distance to the wall will be pretty different. So, how then do we weave rocks to reduce the sort of the final bad outcomes that we're looking at? Well, I'll show you. So when we're looking at the rocks layouts, I'm just going to pull a couple up here. You can see here that this is a right entrance, and if we're always going to the left, what you'll notice is this is a bad outcome right away, right? We'll commit to the left as I travel around. It takes a while, but we can identify how to know when to turn at this rock. And it is as follows. Whenever sort of this rock right here makes, like this border of the rock makes roughly a straight line, we're going to want to weave the rocks. Now there is one exception to this, and it has to do with left entrances. With left entrances, I will show you what ends up happening. There is a little bit of a trick to knowing when you should weave the rocks or not with the left entrances, which is as follows. So let me find the proper photo for it. Okay, so here you can see that we have sort of this straight line with the left entrance. Well, we don't want to weave the rocks here because it's actually going to take us more time than just continuing with the left split. So how are we going to tell whether or not we should weave the rocks in this instance? We'll see that this is roughly straight, and then we'll scout down a little bit. And if we see sort of the second outcropping turn like this, sort of turn outwards, we are going to know that we don't want to sort of weave the rocks. Whenever sort of this outcropping goes this way, it's a good signal that you want to stay on the side that you're on and you don't want to weave the rocks. That is, again, just as a sort of point of contrast, we'll pull up another photo where as we look here, we see a long straight ledge. And if we were to look down a little bit, we would see that instead of going to the outside, sort of to the west or to the same side, it curves to the inside, to the east. This is how we can identify, that we're good to weave the rocks and we're not going to lose any time with left entrances. Otherwise, for right entrances, all you got to know is you just got to look for this sort of roughly straight line. If there's any sort of indentations like this or like significant indentations, you're going to be on the right side of the rocks. So if I were to, say, for example, pull up left entrance, same side, which I'm going to do here. Anytime this isn't really straight, you can sort of see how it's dimples out versus the backside over here is straight. You know that you want to stay on that same side already. So here, not very straight versus the other side, which is straight. So if you ever see a roughly straight outcropping for this first outcropping, right, for this first rock, you know you're probably on the wrong side of it, as long as you check to see if it sort of goes to the outside. And that is only for left entrances. For right entrances, all you care about is whether or not this thing is straight on the left side. If it is straight on the left side, you're going to move over to the other side. And we'll show you that quickly here. So I will pull this up, and remember, we always go to the left, but when we always go to left, this is a right entrance. You can see that it's straight, or just book it down. Straight back, book it down. Straight edge, book it down. Straight edge, book it down. And I can keep going through these photos, and you'll see that when we're in the right entrance, you'll never have sort of that like outward push like that. Instead, it'll always go down that way. So that is a very good thing for us to know. And as you can see here, these are sort of the up-down rocks. And as you'll see, when we always go to the left side, no straight edge here. So we know we just want to keep going left, and we'll get there pretty easily. So with that in mind, that is sort of the general strategy of how we're going to go about getting the best outcomes. So in summary, there are three things we can be doing. We can be always turning at the ledge, which is going to be good because it will improve sort of 3 bad outcomes to being 3 decent outcomes. Even more advanced is we can selectively turn at ledges, so we know what's a long ledge and a short ledge, and we do that using the left entrance read I discussed in this section. Once we do that, we take one bad read and turn it into a decent read. Finally, there is rock weaving. If we properly weave rocks, we can take the remaining 2 bad reads and turn them into decent reads. In this way, even though Tidal Island is mirrored and sort of each layout occurs in both starting orientations, we can figure out how to read and navigate Tidal Island to get good outcomes and avoid bad outcomes. Hopefully you found this helpful. Take it easy.